In this video, I want to share a bit of my personal history as a programmer. I have some source files laying around from pretty much exactly 20 years ago, somewhere around October-November 2005. I thought it would be interesting to reminisce a little and embarrass myself by actually showing the code. So let's do it. The project is a game I made for a tiny local game jam. Let me show it to you first. The game is a side-scrolling platforming shooter. Apparently, while making this game, I decided to pack as many references to things I liked or was interested in at the time as possible. For one, the main character is a penguin, and the texture used for it is actually Tux, the Linux mascot. Also, one of the enemies later in the game is a helicopter with a Microsoft logo on it. Probably I wanted to make some kind of statement here. Ironically, the game was made for and on Windows. But then the enemies that you encounter the most are Agent Smiths from The Matrix, and also milk boxes with shotguns. Yeah. Oh, and don't forget about UFOs that are dropping bombs. The game features the mechanic I was most proud of at the time, bullet time. This is a reference to The Matrix, of course, but also to my favorite game at the time, Max Payne. Well, it's actually still my favorite game. Most sound effects were actually borrowed from Max Payne 2. I hope I'm not getting in trouble by admitting this. Before jumping into the code itself, let me set the scene a little bit. So it's 2005, I'm a 17-year-old who is very close to being at the peak of Mount Stupid on the Dunning-Kruger effect curve. By that time, I had already been programming for a few years and really believed that I was some kind of genius who had mastered the entirety of computer science already. I didn't know anybody in real life who did this, so I didn't even have a reference point. There were still a couple more years before the humbling experience of actually trying to find a job in game dev and getting into the valley of despair. My programming language of choice at the time was Delphi. The sole reason for that was the fact that a couple of years prior, my grandmother had gifted me a book about programming in Delphi. It was a very well written book. It clicked, so I stuck with the language for a while. I'm sure most people haven't even heard of Delphi by now, but in the 2000s, it was quite a hot thing in the world of software development. The Delphi IDE provided an amazing development experience. Memories of its code editor, UI builder, and built-in debugger make me miss it even 20 years later. The programming language itself, being a dialect of Object Pascal, was very approachable, especially in contrast with C++ and even Java, which were also popular options at the time. Also, the Delphi IDE came with an incredibly rich library of easy-to-use drag-and-drop components for any imaginable use case, from basic UI elements to database drivers and networking. Using it for game development wasn't mainstream at all, however. It gained some marginal popularity among small indie game developers, but I can't think of any major titles that were built with Delphi, although the potential was always there in my opinion. My ultimate dream was, of course, to make games, so I tried making them with what I knew. There was a thriving community surrounding the ecosystem. Websites with articles and examples, forums, IRC chats. Honestly, learning about game development and programming in general this way was a great experience. So let's take a look at the code. The first thing to notice is how few source files there are in the project. Evidence of my lack of understanding of how to structure code. Or maybe I'm just used to larger projects by now. Also, there is a module with a quite peculiar name. We'll check what's inside a bit later. The DPR file is the main file of the program containing the entry point. The DPR extension stands for Delphi project. As expected, it's spaghetti code. But I don't know, is it just me, or does Pascal syntax make it look not as ugly as it could be if it was written in a C-like language? The fact that the actual entry point file is 945 lines long really hammers home the spaghetti code point. I didn't use any engine for this game, just raw Win API and OpenGL. The architecture of the whole program is that simple. I wouldn't even call it architecture. The program just spins in a loop, processes Windows messages, if there are any, and renders otherwise. I didn't even bother with proper time-based state updates, and just use a timer that triggers the update every 20 milliseconds or 50 times per second for some reason. State is managed by a single integer variable game mode. Each magic number represents a different state. The main gameplay, main menu, options menu, etc. It's curious to see how the things I was most proud of at the time are actually implemented. The bullet time mechanic is implemented by simply introducing a global variable for time scaling. I called it timex. Maybe x stands for multiplication? And yes, everywhere in the code where I needed to move something around, I just multiplied the amount by this timex variable. If I forgot to add this multiplication in one place, which I most likely did, this one thing wouldn't obey the time scaling. Another feature that I was very proud of is the console. I was always fascinated by those in games of the time, and I wanted to create one myself. Mine was very simple in its implementation. A command could be added by providing a name and a pointer to a variable or a function, along with a type indicating what the pointer points to, a function, integer, or float variable. Looking at the command execution code, I can immediately see that I didn't know about hash maps at the time, so I just iterated through the whole array of commands to find the one with the matching name. Then, based on the type, I'd either call the function by its pointer or assign a value parsed from the string to an integer or float variable by its pointer. No error checks, of course. A string parsing error will just crush the whole game here. Surprisingly, even such a simple system allowed me to implement quite a powerful configuration system and a tool to debug and change the game's behavior during execution. There are a lot of silly things in this code. I had no idea about polymorphism or any kind of composition patterns at the time, so I created lists for every kind of object in the game and iterated through each of them, doing pretty much the same thing with each object. So, about this peculiarly named file. It contains a ton of commented out code, all my desperate attempts in implementing proper collisions. I can vividly remember how hard it was. It was even kind of embarrassing because it was supposed to be something quite simple. Eventually I managed to get something working, but it was still pretty ugly and buggy. Finally, let me just scroll through other parts of the code. Feel free to pause the video if you want to make fun of me. So here you have it. For me, it was interesting to look back at the path I've taken. It was fun and there's no reason to stop, so I hope I will be able to make a similar video in 2045. Thank you for witnessing this reminiscing session of mine. Please give this video a like if you enjoyed it. Subscribe to keep in touch, and I'll see you in my next video. Thank you for watching. Bye.